It is time to begin. I ask everyone to please rise for the invocation of pledge of allegiance.
May the hands of God guide and protect us for the enrichment of the work that needs to be done this night.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Kramer. Farmer.
Here.
Gilbert.
Here.
Hicks. Here. Krieger.
Here.
Kingston.
Here.
Root. Here.
We're all here except Mr. Farmer. Kramer. Mr. Farmer is here. Mr. Kramer is not here.
Rocky Top Country.
He is on vacation this week.
He's down on Rocky Top Mountain.
We have a motion to excuse Mr. Kramer. Is there a second?
Second.
Anyone wish to speak to the motion? All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes. Mr. Kramer's excused this evening. The next item of business is to approve the minutes of our August 12th meeting. Mrs. Root, would you please read the motion to do that?
I move the Swartz Creek City Council approve the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, August 12th, 2019, to be circulated and placed on file.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Are there any additions or corrections to be made to the minutes? Does not look like there are, Madam Clerk, so would you call the motion?
Gilbert.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Kingston.
Yes.
Root.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion is passed. Next item of business is approve tonight's agenda. Mr. Zell, anything to add or change?
No, Your Honor, there's no changes or additions.
All right. Motion then, Mr. Farmer, to approve the agenda as printed.
I move the Swartz Creek City Council approve the agenda as printed for the regular council meeting of August 26, 2019 to be circulated and placed on file.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any speaking to that motion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Hicks.
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes.
Kingston.
Yes.
Root.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Gilbert.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to City Manager's report. Anything to add, Mr. Zettel?
Just some more topical updates about some happenings in the community. Big weekend for Elms Park on Saturday. The art park event went very well. And the dog park fencing is also installed, which also went well. So that's substantially complete at this point. The traffic islands, there's some discussion among the community about making those more visible, identifiable, so that errant drivers don't strike them. And that is something we're working on. We've got cones surrounding them right now, and we have an intent to denote their presence a little bit better with some colored paint like we've done in the past around the curving in downtown where there's areas of concern, as well as getting some vertical features that most of you are probably familiar with in many communities that indicate a pedestrian crossing. They're foldable plastic devices that you see in places like Clarkston, Northville, Sanford, other places. So those will be more visible, but still just is, the phrase mountable by big trucks and emergency vehicles should the need arise. But it is something your typical pedestrian car is going to want to avoid for sure. And that's the purpose of them being there, of course, is to make the crossing safer. And so, in case folks were wondering. School's in session tomorrow. I didn't put that in the report as a notable date or occurrence, but that always changes the patterns of traffic and the level of activity we have in town. We got a celebrity with us here. Mr. Micah released another video with this high school principal, Mr. Kitchen. It's good, so check it out. It's becoming a thing for them. They have a lot of fun doing that. It really, I think, is positive, imaging for the community overall. So, watch that. It's good. School starts tomorrow. Can you think, is there anything else over the weekend?
Just Helmsley, it's been done.
Helmsley is done. Again, we're waiting on forestry improvements until we get a little bit more predictable fall weather for hydration. Likewise, with the downtown streetscape, the forestry will be put in probably later in September. And then the lighting, as fast as consumers can arrange it, which we're told is October. So that'll be that.
And the striping downtown is not complete yet, so it's coming.
Holland Square striping still due. That's it.
We've gotten some inquiries from citizens about why we put traffic circles in the middle of Main Street. Of course, they're pedestrian crossings, they're not traffic circles.
Some people thought they were planter boxes, or, and again, in the Facebook world, there's a lot of people that are walking opinions looking for information to substantiate themselves. And so they like getting ahead of those types of things. But I'm confident with the application of those, we're going to be accomplishing a lot of our walkability goals. In fact, as we get into the presentation, I think we'll see this is a best practice that we should probably be proud of. Is it going to be perfect? Of course not. But as we begin to alter our community to make it more walkable and more suitable for what we're calling placemaking, for recreation, culture, and the livability overall, I think we'll be very happy we have some of these changes now, even though they are different and it's change, and there will be issues, I'm sure. So the traffic islands, again, we'll probably hear more about those types of features generally. Maybe they can even comment as to the application we have here. But it's something we'll be working on in this instance to make sure that we are marking them properly, giving a lot of advance notice, and getting them to be used safely. But also thematically something we might try to see if we can have it work in other areas of the community as well, where we have some similar issues. The idea is it does slow traffic down, it does make it easier for people to walk, it reduces when occurrences do happen, traffic collisions, that they are of a lesser magnitude, and ultimately should help us prosper with some of those other economic and cultural goals, since we're trying to create those places for those events to occur. So it's a big topic of conversation among those groups that circulate that information, and I hope we can have some more education generally in the community about why it's important and why we're doing it. So.
Excellent. Are they the first pedestrian islands in the county?
No, there's some, Lennon Road has one for the Genesee Valley Trail. It's larger scale than what we've done here. But, and maybe Mr. Surface or some of the other members of his team can speak more to that as far as where they exist, where they're planned to be put in. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, other than the ones affiliated with the regional trails. But we may see, I've got if these do work well, there's a couple areas that they could be applied nearby. One example is Apple Creek has a crosswalk across Moorish. It's about impossible, and there is no sidewalk on the east side of Moorish. And so as long as you can eliminate and put it south of the left turn, of course, so that left turn access to the apartments is still viable, you could probably have a mid-block crossing there as well, and increase the safety for those crossers quite a bit, and help to also achieve some of our speed reduction goals. That's one area we've noted in the past has a posted speed limit of 35, probably has a design speed of 45. And so if we can get in there and add more vertical features to the roadway, tighten up the lanes a bit, that is to narrow them or narrow the perception of how much room is there, we can probably lower that design speed to get it more in line with what we're trying to achieve. So that's an example. Of course, we'd have to take a harder look at it, but we've got these two to consider now to make sure they're working right, and we'll see what we can learn from them.
just occurred to me that we may be the innovator in the area too, as to new ideas and upgrading things that other communities haven't thought of yet. So that's good. Well, that's the additions to his report. Do we have a motion to accept the city manager's report?
I move the Swartz Creek City Council accept the city manager's report of August 26, 2019, including reports and communications to be circulated and placed on file.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any questions or comments on anything in that report?
I just have a quick question.
Yes, Mrs. Root.
When do you think those vertical features will go in on the pedestrian crosswalks that you just mentioned?
As fast as we can arrange, we're gonna keep temporary cones cones is what we have there now, until we have the other items in place. And I'm not sure what the delivery time will be for those, but they're very quick to install.
Other questions or comments? Does not look like it. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on the motion?
Krieger,
Yes.
Pinkston,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Gilbert,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Motion passes. We have a number of other reports and communications that are in our packet. Any questions about anything in there that's not on the business for this evening? Ms. Hicks?
The roof invoice emergency repair, explain what happened with that.
We got a court order to replace the roof at, it used to be Green Photography Studio, Grove Street and Morris Road. And upon inspection at that point in time, it had holes through it, for lack of better phrasing. And for us to go through and create specifications with a sealed bid process that's got enough front time for those people to be able to process and return them and then bring it to council, we thought it could be compromising what's left of the roof or the other areas that were now exposed to the elements inside the structure. So we did a single source quote through Lockhart Roofing, and then we were able to go in immediately, within a day or two, I believe, and make those repairs.
So why did we have to do it? Do we own that now?
No, that was a very rare occurrence where we were getting no cooperation through our code enforcement process from the owner. And so we had the ability to make necessary repairs with the court order only and assess those costs back to the property. To be clear, there's a really good chance this could go into tax foreclosure, and that assessment could be waived through the county treasurer land bank fast track process. If that's the case though, we'll probably be looking at the opportunity to acquire that one for the taxes owed and then sell it, or repair it and sell it as we did with other properties. For the time being though, we do believe we were able to remedy a situation that was getting worse and worse pretty quickly.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yes. They were pretty fast. They had it done in a couple of days, the whole thing. I see them.
Yeah, and they replaced a lot of wood and other.
Yeah, they
other
tore all the old
features.
shingles off too,
Yeah.
that were all curled up and that they tried to shingle over.
And that was part of the problem, so.
Yep.
Yeah, you drive by it daily almost, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
No, we almost, as a city, almost never follow through, even when we get a court order. Typically, we go to the owner, indicate we have a court order, and that our process is going to include, either bidding for repairs, or if it's an emergency situation such as this, that we're just gonna sole source them. Often can provide the amount, and then typically they say, oh, well, okay, if that's the alternate, then they find their own solution. And this has happened before with residential dwellings in the community, where by the time we get the court order, they acquiesce and make the necessary repairs. And so I can't actually remember the last time we had to go and perform work that's going to be assessed to this degree.
Mr. Zell, who initiated the court order?
It's the culmination of due process. So upon the roof being identified as deficient, we begin sending notice, and then we request injunctive relief. So we request that they fix the problem. And if they don't, in this case, it was a no-show, no appearance for the court hearing, then there's a judgment. In this case, it was a default judgment in favor of the city as prosecuted by Mike Gilder's firm. And then we take the order and have the relief that was requested, which is to fix the problem. And so we do not rely too heavily on due process that simply results in fines and fees as a stick, so to speak, to get people to conform. We always just request that we get to the root of the problem and make those repairs. So it starts in code enforcement, and then once the relief is requested through a citation, which is served to the property and the owner, then it's handled by our municipal attorney office for Genesee County prosecution.
You know what court handles those?
No. Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does. It kind of surprised me when I saw that in the packet too, because when I came to hometown days, this year Mr. Green was there working on the roof, and he was going to repair it. And so I was surprised that he never did it.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it probably turned out to be a much bigger job than he could handle by himself.
Yeah, we haven't been able to communicate with him, other than he was putting shingles over a roof that, according to our official, should have been done. And so it's an unapproved process, unpermitted process that we would stop for that reason, and then try to obviously communicate what the expectation was for the repair, and then not having further communication or permit hold or any work in good faith being performed, we went and used to exercise the rights bestowed by the court order. My understanding is the rest of the building does appear to be secure and up to code.
I believe that Dr. Pinkston, he had some information on the historical importance of that building in the city.
That building?
Yes.
No.
No?
Gilbert.
You did. Gilbert did. Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Gilbert.
Yeah, it was Dean's Township Hall, or offices. I voted there before.
That was before we became a city.
And then, no,
No.
it was after the city.
Oh, really?
But that was still Gaines Township Hall.
Okay.
Right. And then they built that new hall on Grand Lake Road, and they sold this one to Frank Jewell. And he had his tax business in there, and he sold that. The people that bought it then sold it to Greens. And
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I knew that.
Anything else in the packet? If not, we will open the meeting to the public, and this is your first chance to address the council. If you have anything that's on your mind you'd like us to know about, please speak up now, approach the podium, tell us your name and address, and what you'd like to communicate to us. We'll have another chance after we conduct our business for you to address us, if you want to wait.
Steve Schmaker, 7446 Country Meadow Drive. Note on the new median stops, the signs for them, right, for the Holland Drive on the north side. You got tree, light post, general utility post, then the post. I don't think anybody's going to see it on that side. I don't know what the solution is for that, but unless you start combining some of those, I don't know how you. On the park and ride, I think that still references finance director, which we don't have that position anymore. Probably named elsewhere. We want to just have a general resolution too, maybe that renewals have we had for Legacy or its successor? No bids. I'm curious about that. Also, it says it's incorporated, but the contract says it's being signed by their partner. Corporations all have partners, so you'd have to have an officer signing that. That's about it, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else wishes to address the council? We'll jump into our business this evening.
Mr. Mayor, if permit me, quick comment, that light post is being relocated.
Okay,
It was blocking visibility.
thank you. First item of business is presentation on safe routes to school. All right,
Ready for me?
we are.
All right.
And it's a good thing you're presenting since school starts tomorrow.
That's true, right?
All right, hold on, I'm gonna mess this up, I guarantee it. That one's not doing anything. Okay.
Oh, wow, all right.
There we go.
Great. All right, everybody. My name is Cade Surface. I'm with the Crim Fitness Foundation. I am here to talk to you about what is really shaping up to be a really exciting project, I think, both for the residents of Swartz Creek and particularly for the students and the parents that are served by our Flint Community School System. The last time I was in front of this body was 20 years ago, and I was a Cub Scout, and I came to advocate for the addition of a bike lane on Miller Road. That worked out, so hopefully I'm convincing today as well. I know that you heard from my colleague Teresa Roach a few months ago, earlier in this year, when we were beginning this Safe Routes to School process, and I know that she went over the nuts and bolts of what Safe Routes to School looks like, what we were kind of going for, and you were really supportive of that work. So I won't talk too much about that background. I'll do a brief overview for our guests. And then I'll go into a little bit of a conversation about the work that we've been doing so far, all of the engagement and the planning that we've been doing, offer you guys a chance to give me some feedback and give you an idea of what we're going to be doing for this sort of second half of this application process. I understand that the way our room is set up, it might be a little bit tough for you guys to see. I'll try to kind of get out of your way, but it is a pretty visual presentation, so I may just kind of step in front to point out specific aspects of what we're discussing today.
If he's in your way, there are some open seats in the front.
Great. Feel free to just tell me to move too if I'm in your way. All right. So, as a quick reminder of what Safe Routes to School is, Safe Routes to School is an international effort to make it easier, safer, and more fun for parents and students to choose to get to school by walking or biking. So that's pretty simple. Locally, we use improvements to the built environment, similar to the things that Mr. Zettel was referring to, as well as programmatic and educational measures to reach this goal. So we like to improve our sidewalks and crosswalks, our lighting and our signage, all of those great things that make our neighborhoods sort of safer and easier to walk in. But then we also like to back those things up with educational and programmatic and encouragement and enforcement measures to make sure that people are using our nice new built infrastructure in the correct way. So something that's already been sort of referred to tonight with some of the other measures that have taken place, we like to really back up and reinforce the work that we do with these kind of interpersonal conversations and measures. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the process that we've gone through so far in order to arrive at the recommendations that we're going to be making. So we went through a three-step engagement and data collection process to gauge the opinions and the needs of students, their families, school staff, and other stakeholders, including residents of neighborhoods and the city of Swartz Creek. The first of these engagement measures was a survey process. There were actually 3 surveys that were part of that. So we surveyed every student at Elms Elementary School, Cyrene Elementary School, and Swartz Creek Middle School to gauge their ideas, their feelings about transportation, getting to and from school, fears they had, if they liked it, if they didn't like it, reasons why they may do it or not do it. We did the same thing with parents. We had a really great response from parents. I was really impressed with the enthusiasm from school staff and from parents and kind of getting these opinions back to me. So we had over 20% at all of our schools, and I think with Elms Road we had near 100%, which that might not sound like a lot, but I do this in a lot of schools, and that's a huge response. So it was really encouraging to see so many people let us know how they felt about this process. And then lastly, we had every homeroom teacher at all 3 of these schools survey their kids for a week to figure out how they actually got to school that day and how they went home from school the day before. So we were able to get a really concise snapshot of how students are currently getting to and from school. And all of this took place in the last few weeks of the school year. Thanks, Teresa. And actually, will you go back to one more? And the last process that we went through was what we call walking audits. These are events that we held at all 3 schools. In that last week of school, I was really impressed by how the principals and staff rallied to get these walking audits done for the school year. We had a different audit on every day at all 3 of the schools that I mentioned. We had a really great showing from parents and students. We had over 50 participants between parents, students, staff, and just residents in the neighborhood. Go on some walks with us, point out infrastructure needs, give us feedback on different type of programmatic improvements that we could make to improve conditions for walkers and bikers in the city of Swartz Creek.
We have ice cream after.
And we did have ice cream and pizza, so that helps too. So I'll talk about sort of that first process, the mapping. So like I said, we mapped the home addresses of every student registered to Elms, Cyrene, and Swartz Creek Middle School. This helped us determine a few things. This is an example of our composite map. All those green dots are student addresses. The blue dots are school sites. As you can see, we have some students that live really neatly within the neighborhoods that some of these schools were initially built to serve. We have some students who live a lot further out. I was one of those kids. I went to Moorish Elementary School, but I lived miles away. I had to get driven every day. And then we have some students who live even outside the district, some quite a bit of ways. So by mapping this, we're able to get a really good visual idea of where we can be really strategic with our recommendations. So we were able to figure out how close each student lives to their school. And we were able to figure out where we had concentration of student residences in relation to their school. So we can make really strategic improvement recommendations. So anything that I'm suggesting is going to be backed up by this. I'm not going to tell us to put a crosswalk or suggest that we put a sidewalk anywhere that isn't directly between a concentration of student populations and the front door of your school. Alright, so something we learned from our student address mapping, I don't think any of this will be too surprising to you, but I wanted to lay it all out for you. Is that we had a pretty small percentage of students who live within a really short distance of Elms Elementary School. That school in particular is sited in such a way that even if you do live close by, you kind of have to take a long way around if you want to walk or drive there. But as you can see, if we kind of move further down in the columns, we do have a pretty good percentage of people that live within a 2-mile radius of the school. And I know that 2 miles seems like a lot, and in a lot of cases it is. It is a 10-minute bike ride, but the reason why I point out that distance is because that is the distance that we are able to actually apply for funding to support. So we have around a quarter of students at a lot of our schools, but with Cyrene, we all know that neighborhood is really well suited for people to be able to walk and bike. When we were there, we saw tons of kids riding and walking their bikes, and walking. So we have about 2/3 of the kids at Cyrene do live within a 10-minute bike ride range, and about a quarter of them live within a 7-minute walk. So that's really exciting and really encouraging. Okay, so next we went through that survey process that I told you about. I'm not going to dive too deep into this because it's pretty thick with information. I get excited about all this stuff, but I don't want to bore you guys. I did provide full long-form versions of all of these reports and maps, both to Mr. Zettel and to Ben. So if you guys want access to those, contact them, or I would be happy to send those over to you electronically as well. But just a few things that were noted from this long survey process. That really, depending on the school, we have very different issues that are brought up as barriers or reasons why both students and parents are choosing maybe to not walk or bike to school. So in the case of the middle school, this probably isn't surprising. A lot of them are just citing distance. They're just too far away. I was one of those kids too, way too far away to walk or bike to school. But if we come down to Cyrene, that really evens out, and then the issues that they are presenting are about some of the things we've been talking about today, so speed of traffic, concerns about crosswalks, right? The amount of traffic, just simply other factors that aren't about necessarily the physical environment around them, but are about the way that other people are using that environment. And those are the things that are preventing them from making what we think is like the healthy, positive choice to be able to walk or bike to school. Okay. So this is interesting data because this is from the parents who actually do allow their children to walk or bike to school. The first thing you may notice is that Elms Road doesn't have any responses, and that's because none of the parents that we surveyed told us that they currently let their child walk or bike to school on a regular basis. We did have some kids and parents that said they walk or bike on special occasions, but it seems like they need a lot of support for that. So we had one family that rode on the last day of school every year, but their grandpa drove behind them to make sure that they were safe. So that's a thing that we really want to be able to impact and change, and we have some suggestions for you guys for some ways that we can do that. At Cyrene Elementary School, so in the middle of that neighborhood, a lot of concerns about speed. We know some areas around the neighborhood where speed is an issue. And at the middle school, there were some concerns about sidewalks or pathways. There are some glaring opportunities for improvement for better sidewalks, pathways, crosswalks, possibly bridges to get that school a little bit more accessible to the population. All right, so less than 1% of Elms Road students reported that they walked or biked to school. So basically what I just said. 4% of Swartz Creek Middle School students reported that they walk or bike to school, and 16% of Cyrene students reported that they walk or bike. So those are all pretty low, but if we compare that to that graph that I showed you a few slides back, that is not really representative of the students who could be walking or biking simply based on distance. So this is a really great opportunity for us to look at infrastructure and policy and programmatic changes to convince the rest of that population that do live within close proximity to make that choice to walk or bike. All right, now we'll talk about the walking audits. These were a lot of fun. The walking audits were basically an opportunity for current staff, for some city staff, school staff to meet with kids and parents on site. Like I said, have some pizza and ice cream, talk a little bit about what makes a place walkable or bikeable, feel safe, feel like a fun place. And then we took them on guided walks around each of the campuses and gave them the opportunity to both report back to us about what they were seeing, what they thought was good or bad, to take photos, to have some discussion in small groups afterwards. This is just one of the routes that we took. We took a couple, like I said, at each site. This one here is for the middle school. As you can see, we started at kind of the south entrance, went along Crapo, went through downtown, and then back to the north entrance of the school. Each of those numbers represents a comment or a complaint or a suggestion that was made by a student or a parent. So we have some really rich feedback, and we also took photos of all of those things too, and then we incorporated into the suggestions. So here's just some photos of some of the things we saw. This kid ran into a tree. Here's Mr. Zell walking with some kids across Miller Road. We had a little bit of a few spots with some sidewalk that need to be repaired. All right, we've got some really great sidewalk in front of Cyrene. We've got some puddles and some issues that just rained, so it really demonstrated some of the areas that maybe needed a little bit of changing in order to be safer and more comfortable. Those are just a few images that I think are emblematic of a lot of the bigger things that we saw. I will say right off the bat that we were really impressed, honestly, with the infrastructure that we saw in the city. We could tell that you guys value your infrastructure, you value maintaining it. By and large, there was a lot of good stuff to comment, and the kids noticed that, especially around Cyrene. So that was really exciting to see. What we noticed is that there were a couple of spots that needed basic maintenance. It kind of seemed like that was already built into your plan, that was going to be improved, so we didn't make too many recommendations based on that. But there were some, just some problematic spots, some areas that could really use some real attention to kind of connect the gaps, right, in between your really great infrastructure to make it safe for a kid to get from one point to another. So some general responses that we got were a lack of safe crossings, so people feeling uncomfortable safely walking across a variety of streets around the schools. A lack of demarcation for driveways and proper ways to get through parking lots. So you guys are probably familiar with this. If you are crossing a parking lot, it can kind of feel like a no man's land. You're not really sure where you are safest in crossing. That's especially poignant in a school site, right, where we have parents coming in and out in buses and kids who might not be quite sure how to navigate their own environment. So that was definitely a thing we wanted to bring up. A lack of awareness or respectful behaviors of drivers in parking lots. I know that this extended out into kind of the areas just outside of parking lots. So for example, that area right outside of the middle school parking lot, that Fairchild and Cappy intersection, it's sort of treated like an extension of the parking lot. People are moving in and out, sort of already in parking mode, so we needed some ways to sort of make everyone be more aware and mindful of their surroundings in those really key points. Some missing links in the sidewalk network, and a likelihood of crime or danger along walking routes. So that's something that we can in some ways change with our environmental recommendations, things like trimming our trees or opening up sight lines, doing the things that you recommended with moving around where poles are, but that's also something that we can really impact with that programmatic element that I was referring to. So that includes working with our police force, doing education in the classroom, all kinds of things to make sure that people and our students and parents are feeling safe and aware as they're navigating around their schools. And I wanted to make sure I included that because that comment actually came from a mom near Cyrene who lived just a block away, but she had not decided to let her child walk simply because she wasn't sure if her child would be safe in that short walk between her house and Cyrene. So I wanted to make sure that we kind of honored the feedback that she gave us. All right, all that being said, our goals with our recommendations are to encourage drivers to drive at safe speeds and to be extra aware of pedestrians along the streets and within the intersections. So this harkens back to what we were referring to even before I started my presentation, that there are ways that we can change the physical environment, the ways that we can change the infrastructure on our streets and our sidewalks to not impede the movement of traffic, but to simply allow traffic to still move through efficiently, but be more aware of the fact that there are people walking around and that they should probably kind of take off the autopilot that some of us get on when we're on those big, wide, comfy streets, and be more aware of the people that are walking around them. We want to engineer spaces to direct pedestrians to the most visible and best supported sidewalks and crosswalks to keep them safe from vehicles. So in the same way that we want to make sure we're managing our traffic, we also want to make sure that we're managing our pedestrians so that we're not putting them in an uncomfortable or an unsafe environment. So that includes sort of changing how our crosswalks work, shortening the length of crosswalks so it's sort of safer for them, and directing sidewalks in certain ways so that we're not kind of dumping kids out into unsafe places. And lastly, to educate students and parents on the safest routes, as well as safe walking and driving practices. So again, this comes from both sides. We really want to encourage and educate the kids, but also the parents. All right, so now that I've told you about all of this engagement work, all of this data collection, all of our philosophies and stuff, all of this comes down to the fact that we are crafting a Safe Routes to School application on behalf of the City of Swartz Creek and the Swartz Creek Community Schools. So as a quick reminder of what that means, I know you guys approved kind of this process, but this means that we have the opportunity to apply for up to $200,000 worth of infrastructure improvements, all of these things that I've been talking about per school building. So that's an opportunity for around $600,000 of improvements to impact safe behaviors, safety for kids and drivers within the City of Swartz Creek. So we're really excited about this. We've got a lot of suggestions, again, through all of these processes. What we're talking about today is just the full breadth of suggestions that kind of came out of this process. It's sort of a full wish list, if I may. So we're going to be going through this, getting some feedback from you guys, passing off some of this to our engineering team, and then from there we'll be able to have a closer idea of what the costs of these improvements are, and then we'll be able to whittle that down to a more concise, more manageable project scope, which will fit within the budget. We also know that with all of the sort of wonderful ongoing projects that the city is doing already, and the projects that the school district has coming up, there's opportunities for some of that money to be stretched even further. So if there are new driveways or sidewalks being poured on school property, then we can kind of match up with those, and the impact can really be a lot greater than even the $600,000 that I'm referencing. So our first area that we wanted to really dive into is the north entrance of Swartz Creek Middle School. I think this is an area that a lot of us are familiar with. We know that there have been problems at this area in the past, that there have been some, I believe, pedestrians that have been hit by cars in this section of the city. So I know it was important for us to have this be priority number one and really focus on this. So a couple of things that we're suggesting is really encouraging at the moment kids to use this, this sidewalk section from the school. The school entrance is down here if you aren't sure. Thank you, Teresa. So to make sure we're repairing and bringing that sidewalk up to code, it was in pretty good shape, but there were a few sections that could be improved. And then really discouraging them from, at least at this moment, from using the sidewalk on the east side of the driveway and removing that crosswalk. So the reason why we're doing that is because the stop sign situation is such that the traffic isn't really prepared to stop for kids at that spot. We really didn't want to have any demarcations on the street that was telling kids that it was okay to cross there. So we're suggesting to remove that crosswalk entirely, to repair the existing sidewalk, to do something called bump outs on the corner. Bump outs are simply a way to slightly narrow the turning radius of a corner. And what that does is exactly what I just said. It helps drivers be a little bit more mindful. They can't take a turn quite so fast, so they're slowing down, they're looking around, and that's exactly where we want to do it because we know we have tons of kids that are walking right there. Middle school kids, siren kids, and high school kids, kids going from campus to campus. Lots of people that are walking right there. We want to make sure that we're really encouraging, A, drivers to slow down and be aware, B, shortening the distance for pedestrians so they're able to kind of get over quicker and safer. So yeah, we think that's a really good treatment to suggest there. The crosswalk itself, we are suggesting to enhance. It actually already has been enhanced by your recent project, so it looks a lot more visible. It's very apparent where the pedestrian space is. And we would suggest even including some more ways to enhance it, things like signage or additional paint to make it more obvious that this is a pedestrian zone. And then lastly, we are suggesting adding sidewalk on the north side of Cappy, and this actually came as a direct response to Mr. Claren's request because he has so many students that are traveling from the middle school to the high school. The sidewalk kind of north of this intersection is pretty narrow and it's on a slope. So we thought that it might be a good idea to kind of complete what is a gap in your sidewalk network and to lay some sidewalk on the north side of the street there and connect it up with the sidewalk at the high school. I'm not going to go into this much detail about every intersection or street, but I wanted to give you an idea of our process so that you know sort of how deeply we're thinking about all of these interventions to keep your kids safe. So when I'm talking about an enhanced crosswalk, this is a little bit of what Mr. Zettel was referring to earlier about ways that we can make these crossings safer. I've already touched on these points, I don't want to belabor them, but ways that we can make these safer are to have really high visibility, high impact signage. We have some of these signs that I believe you were referring to before that may be a good solution for your pedestrian islands on Miller Road. All of these are doing the same thing. They're really alerting drivers. They're really showing where the pedestrian spaces are. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of ways to enhance a crosswalk to make it a better and safer place. If I knew that that was a topic that you guys were excited to talk about, I could come back next week and present on way more about that, but I'll save you that today. All I want to say is that when I'm referring to enhancing crosswalks in the rest of this presentation, I mean treatments like this, treatments like bump outs, treatments potentially like raised crosswalks, anything that's going to slow down traffic and support students. Yeah, okay. Great. All right, so the south entrance is another issue that we know needed some treatment. We have a large area that currently doesn't have any sidewalk. We have a creek here that's a pretty big barrier to be able to walk to school. So what we're suggesting is looking into not only completing the sidewalk network here, but finding a way, potentially using multiple funding sources to bridge over the creek and to have some on-campus pathing that is able to really connect these residences to the school. And in particular, this is important because we have some fairly dense housing up here that we think it's really important to make sure that those kids who do live really close to the school to have the opportunity to be able to walk there easily. Currently, their walking conditions are kind of roundabout and a little bit unsafe simply because there isn't an actual sidewalk or crosswalk there. All right, here's another area where we're just considering connecting where you currently have a gap. So this is near Cyrene. You may know that the area in front of Winchell Park does not currently have sidewalk access. It kind of stops right when it gets there. I know that this is part of your 5-year Parks and Rec plans. We want to make sure that we included that as something that we thought was a really great sort of fundable option. Seymour Road was cited by a lot of parents as a barrier for Cyrene. So a lot of kids that do live pretty close to the school were uncomfortable with crossing Seymour Road. So you have one fairly well-supported crosswalk at Oakview and Seymour, but the rest of the crossings aren't supported with crosswalks. And we have the sidewalk actually only extends for this block, so we're proposing to extend that sidewalk network for the length of Seymour, as you see here. It's we're kind of on our side here. It's north here and south there. Cyrene School is right here. All right, Elms Road. This one has some stuff on it, so it's a little more obvious what we're talking about here. Elms Road Elementary, as I described before, has our worst walking rates in that we have the fewest people that are currently walking. I'll say we had the most excitement from that school in our surveying process and our walking audit process. The principal of that school had just had some trouble with his leg, but he even went out with his crutches and walked the full mile in the rain with us, so that was really exciting. We had lots of parents. It was a really great, although damp, walking audit process. So we started at that school on the actual Elms Road Elementary campus, figuring out some ways that we could kind of enhance that. I think the graphic here is a little skewed. Our staff member that made this, I think, put it in the wrong spot, but we know that there is an intention to put in a new driveway to Elms Road, so I think it's a little bit further down here. But with any new infrastructure that you're putting into that site, we would of course recommend that you first of all have a crosswalk that crosses it so kids can get safely across, and of course sidewalk adjacent to it so that kids can safely access the front door. Supporting your crosswalk here, enhancing it so kids are safe. And then figuring out this is one of those parking areas that we were talking about. So we wanted to actually kind of create a curb and a sidewalk here, because right now it's simply flat pavement that connects the staff parking lot to the main parking lot. It's a pretty confusing place if you're walking. You're not really sure if you're supposed to be there or not, but it's a place where the kids actually are supposed to be leaving if they're walking out to the street. So we just wanted to make it a little bit clearer that that was a place where kids are supposed to be and cars aren't necessarily supposed to be. Okay, and then lastly with Elms, we've got a couple of big cool projects happening here that we're excited about. This yellow line shows where you have planned trail. I think it's really exciting what you guys are doing with your trails. And there's an opportunity for us to make Elms Elementary even more accessible, especially to the kids living in the subdivision, by extending that trail by a little bit and actually letting kids access the school from the rear of the building. So one suggestion is to do that, and then simply with the light blue you see, that's just a completion of the sidewalk network that already exists in your city. So we don't have any sidewalk along Bristol Road. We know that there are kids and parents in that neighborhood that want to walk and bike. The grandpa driving behind their kids that I was telling you about on the last day of school, they're from that neighborhood. They want to be able to do that more often. So we definitely want to just kind of complete and give them kind of that, the tools to be able to make that healthy choice. All right, so I know I went through that really fast. That was a lot of information. I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to, I guess, respond to me. I'm not sure how that works within the format of your council meeting, so if you just want me to be quiet and sit down, I'd be happy to do that and wait until the public comment section. But if you have any immediate responses, I would be happy to talk to you about those.
This is 6.
In the state of Michigan, when someone steps off into a crosswalk, are cars supposed to stop or not?
So that is Adam, you can, so I should introduce, this is Adam Jenks with the Michigan Fitness Foundation. He's a big supporter of this work and has some of the technical knowledge to kind of fill in the gaps. I believe that with this instance, that might be a local ordinance.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So just to give you a little bit of the background, I'm the grant coordinator for the Bay region, so I would be working with the schools through this process and kind of looking at these different treatments and giving some insight on their eligibility in terms of the scheme of the grant. But as far as the state of Michigan statute with the pedestrian walking into the crosswalk, they'd have to yield at that point. But there's no language that says the motorist should stop. That would be a local ordinance that would have to be instituted.
So they are required to yield, but they are not required to stop by state law, but the local body has the ability to enact a law to stop. And at this point, I'm not sure if Swartz Creek has that law.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Okay.
I think we'll open it up to the members of the public here. Anybody here have a question for them or comments on it?
I really enjoyed the mapping.
Great. Yeah, we can provide copies of those maps to you guys as well. That's one of my favorite parts of this process. It really helps us to quickly visualize where we need to do some of these interventions.
Shoemaker.
Yeah, if you're forcing everybody from the middle school onto the west side of the road, but if they're in that subdivision just north of, that you'd have to reach from the east side of the road, you're almost forcing them to come back out and cross the road at the intersection again.
Yeah,
I think that's, you're almost defeating yourself because you're forcing them to go back across that intersection where you don't want them to go, instead of, oh, I could have gone on the east side and just gone up that side, even though there's no sidewalk, and not encountered any vehicles except what's in the parking lot.
Right, so thank you for bringing that up. That's actually a component that we had discussed this afternoon when we visited the Swartz Creek Middle School site. We initially were thinking by simply removing that one sort of leg of sidewalk to nowhere, that would be encouraging kids to walk in the right place, but you're absolutely right. There are kids who I think are currently just kind of taking the creek bed to get to the school from some of those eastern blocks. So I know that there's kind of a long-term plan for some creekside trails in Swartz Creek that would support those kids getting to that intersection, and then they would still be allowed to, they'd still be able to cross the creek from there. They just wouldn't be crossing the street. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so that's one of the things that's really helpful to actually kind of get on the ground and talk to some of the people, because that was one of the things that we initially thought was unnecessary, and then today it was apparent that it was necessary to make sure we were supporting those residences. Anything else? All right, well then let me talk a little bit about next steps. We're going to, like I said, we're going to pass this off to our engineering friends to kind of go through this. We're going to have some conversations with law enforcement and get into more conversations with the school district to talk about what they have planned. We'll have another series of meetings with stakeholders to figure out some of the programmatic suggestions that we want to include in this application. And if all goes well, we are hoping to submit this application for the October funding round, which then, Adam helped me out with this, likely would be reviewed by MDOT a little bit later in the year, and then would potentially be funded in 2020. So that's what we're doing so far. I will absolutely be back to talk to you guys about some of the specifics. And if at any point you want me to talk about traffic islands, I'd be happy to do that. Mid-block crossings. I will say I live a couple of blocks away from a mid-block crossing within the city of Flint on University Avenue, formerly 3rd. We initially had a lot of resistance to that when it was first put in. A lot of people confused about it. We had bollards and plantings and stuff in the middle that some people liked, some people didn't. I can say now, it's been there about 10 years, that it's really great for our neighborhood. It, again, really manages the traffic well, really makes me feel a lot safer as a pedestrian, because I have a place to stop in the middle if there's a lot of cars going by. And now that street's like one of the main parade routes for our monthly soccer games and all the other good stuff that's going on. So it really has contributed to that sense of place that Mr. Zettel was referring to. But if you want me to come back with more information about those or any other interventions, I'd be happy to. All right, thank you.
I just want to add there, Kate and his team are fantastic. They're a great resource. There is a plethora of data that he can send or I can forward you digitally if you want to really get into the survey results and some of their other findings. Or if you want to check out some of these sites, you almost really have to before we can start looking at engineering and priorities. When you get to like talking about Maple and Crapo and how you get to the middle school, for example, you got to spend time on the ground walking those neighborhoods. If you ever have an interest in doing that, let me know. I can meet you down there. That'll, as he indicated, that'll be the next step, is creating a wish list, so to speak, and then prioritizing it for the submission for funding.
Very good. Moving on, we have the legacy assessing contract renewal.
Hold on. I knew it. There we go.
And the lights are on. Is it Houston's job?
No, Sean.
Your job? I thought. You're the next on my list, so I thought, I wonder what you're trying to do. Okay, go ahead.
I move the city of Swartz Creek approve an agreement with Legacy Assessing Services Incorporated of Fenton, Michigan, agreement as follows. Want me to read it, the whole thing? Well, there's no page numbers up here, so.
How many pages is it?
Let's see, how many pages we got?
The agreement's 10 pages of the packet. I apologize for missing the footer. Page numbers for this package.
All right, let's see. further, pages, 10 pages. And further direct the mayor and city clerk to endorse and execute this agreement on behalf of the city.
Second.
That's good.
That's the first motion, I don't know where
I could read it though.
What?
Do we have a second to the motion?
I did.
Oh, okay, sorry. Motion made and seconded. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? This is to renew the contract for our assessing company.
How do we assess their value? I guess,
I'm not sure I understand.
I mean, at what point should we open it up before renewing the contract?
That's a great question. We often look at professional services the same way I use the analogy as a household might look at a family physician. On one hand, there's an expectation of government to be prudent and to solicit bids for services to make sure you're getting a proper price and a good product that's competitive on the market. Often, as we'll talk about even with the MDOT situation, you're not allowed to pursue bids for service. You're supposed to pursue qualifications and then negotiate pricing anyways, as it happens. And so the comfort level with professional services is less objective or metric than something like a contract for flat work, concrete. Okay, you can measure that on the market per unit. It's pretty interchangeable, and the quality or compliance with the product is known and measurable. Something like assessing is less easy to do. So, for example, the city's municipal attorney, I think, is 30 years running now.
Yeah, pretty close.
And again, like a family physician, that history is important, and often it's detrimental to switch professional service provider unless there's something going on there that's undesirable. And that's measured through the experience that council would have, to the extent they can observe it, or through staff members or the community that engages those services as well. And so at this point, I feel like we get a very good value for what they're doing, and all of their performance measures, as indicated by the state, are the absolute highest quality. And I can include those in the next council packet. I wish I'd have done it this one, because they do have a perfect score on what they call the AMAR review, which is where the state comes in and they audit the entire office, the assessing office for the city, on a number of different factors to make sure that the records are accurate. They audit some of the assessment records themselves to make sure they were properly done, reported, and filed. That we have all our processes in place to be fair and transparent. In point of fact, we had one policy, if council recalls, we had to adopt in the last year, knowing that it was going to be part of this compliance for review. And that even had something to do with hours of operation. There's expectations for that in the state of Michigan for folks to be able to access those records and speak to an assessor. So to the extent that it is objective or metric, observable, they do have a literal perfect score from the state regulatory agency that oversees them, the Department of Treasury. We are very pleased with them as staff in terms of the reliability, the product they deliver, and the consulting services we get during board review and the Michigan Tax Tribunal appeals that we engage in from time to time. We could see if there's a firm out there that might price better. In point of fact, that's probably always possible. But again, looking at something similar to legal services or the physician comparison, we're more concerned with getting it done right. I can certainly speak to it being competitive. We can pull the contracts, I think, for neighboring municipalities. Gaines Township, in point of fact, I think pays double. For a parcel count, it's pretty similar to ours. I'll confirm that, but they've been pretty good, and they've kept their rate of increase to match ours, which for many years was 0%. By ours, I mean the prevalent wage increase found in the collective bargaining agreements.
Well, I'm happy to hear. I'm good to hear.
I have a nephew who is an assessor, and talking to him, found out it's much more objective than it is subjective. When they assess things, they have a whole long checklist of things they have to look at on each property. And if it's got this and this and this, that adds this much money to the value. So there's not a whole lot of their personal opinion as to how much it's worth. It's all goes right down the checklist, and then they look at other properties and what they sell for in the area, and compare it to that to get their prices. As long as they're doing a good job and making sure all those things are done when they're evaluating a value on it, that's what you look for. Yes, sir.
How many days a week are they here?
Heather's here 1 day a week, Tuesday.
So for 4 days, we're paying them $2,618 a month for 4 days.
Yeah, there's additional work that goes into field work. If you look at the Exhibit A, for example, they're required to physically look at each property in the city over a period of time. I think it's 5 years. And so when you hear about residents wondering why the person's walking up and down their street with a laser tape measure and a wheel and taking pictures, it's because their staff are out there in the field updating the property cards by doing a physical inspection of each piece of property in the city. And so Heather McDermott, the assessor practices here at Swartz Creek, is here 1 day a week. But they do put a lot of staff hours into literally assessing property in the field, taking measurements, photos, narrative updates on what they see, and trying to rate conditions and such. And then, of course, the Michigan Tax Tribunal processes, board review processes, and some of the ongoing education for our folks here. And as a professional service, I suspect in the industry it's valued at over $100 an hour, like most services are these days, if you were to buy their time in those increments. So for example, if we had an attorney working in this office just 1 day a month for 8 hours, you could expect a bill of $1,000 to $1,600 in Genesee County, just for 1 day. Now, I'm not arguing that assessment services are valued at the level of an attorney, but I don't think you'll find many that are below $100 an hour for any service at this point.
Well, in the past, I've had my own dealings with this company. And I didn't like their attitude. I could tell you what happened, but you already know. That's all I have.
Anyone else? Anyone else is asking for the floor? I believe we're ready to vote, Madam Clerk.
Pinkston,
Yes.
Root,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Gilbert,
No.
Hicks,
Yes.
Krieger.
Yes. Motion passes. The next item of business is the fire budget approval. And we have the chief here, and we have another member of the fire department here. We're going to go into the new fire budget for us. That's a one-year budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, one-year budget will begin in January of 2020. I believe it's included in your packet. This year's budget has only seen about a 1.3% increase over last year. Operationally, it was a significant, much higher dollar amount because of the fire truck purchase and an air compressor. That was capital expenses, but it's only going to see about a 1.3% increase over last year for our operation. And if there's any questions that the council has, I'll be more happy to answer.
Any specific questions on the fire budget? Or comments?
Thanks for keeping us safe.
Thank you, sir. Pass it on my mouth.
I guess guess we don't have any questions.
Well, thank you, appreciate your time.
I did want to mention, Mr. Zettel has been in negotiations with the township on improving some things. One thing is setting money aside, a proper amount of money aside for new purchases of equipment, so that we have the money when it comes time to buy things, and we want to make sure that we know what's going to be needed or when, so that we know how much money we have to have by the time it comes around making those purchases. And we made some changes in the way that we are paying for snow plowing, lawn mowing. Anything else, Mr. Zettel?
No, not related to that.
Okay.
And council's already made the adjustment to the annual appropriation. So that's active, that's live. The contribution for fire equipment now is $75,000 a year. Previously it was $30,000. So I believe the township's done the same.
And I believe it was quite an achievement to get the township to put money aside ahead of time too, as we city was doing. I'm glad that we finally negotiated that we're both on the same page there. No one else is asking for the floor, Madam Clerk, so I think we're moving right along with our meeting here, and we can call the roll.
We haven't read the motion yet.
We didn't read the motion. We can't call the roll on the motion. Dr. Pinkston, we're not quite moving that fast, so can you read it, please?
Whereas the agreement for fire service between Clayton Township, Swartz Creek City indicates a specific process for budgetary review and approval by the municipalities. And whereas the staff of Clayton Township and the Swartz Creek City have found the proposed budget to be acceptable by both parties. And whereas the Swartz Creek Fire Board affirmed the proposed budget at the regular meeting on August 19, 2019. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Swartz Creek approve the fiscal year 2019 Swartz Creek Area Fire Board budget, a copy of which is attached hereto, gross maximum total not to exceed $311,557.51 to be paid commensurate of the agreement between the City of Swartz Creek and the Township of Clayton, payment being the city's obligation of 1/2 of the proposed total budget.
Second.
Mr. Zettel, is commiserate a real word?
Yes.
Before.
In line with or matching? I'm gonna look it up. Define commiserate.
It is now.
Okay, that figures, it's not working.
The way with commensurate with an N in there.
Is it a typo then?
I won't delay the motion here. You can check that later with the dictionary and see if it's a word or if it's close to the word we want to use.
Yeah, to be sympathetic to.
So it is a real word? All right.
Sympathetic.
Probably not the best word choice. It sort of makes sense.
Taking note of the agreement, that's what I read it as.
No different, okay. Very good, I've heard something tonight.
We'll change it for future, just so we don't.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Gilbert seconded it. Now I believe we're ready to vote.
Root,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Gilbert,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes.
Pinkston.
Yes.
That motion passes. Moving on to the MDOT park and ride contract renewal. Another very lengthy contract, which you do not have to read.
Thank you. Whereas the MDOT has affirmatively found that contracting with municipalities for maintenance of state trunk lines and bridges within local jurisdictions is in the best public interest, and whereas the city of Swartz Creek and the Michigan Department of Transportation an existing contractual relationship in which the city provides specific maintenance services for the park and ride facility on Miller Road by I-69, including snow removal, trash collection, mowing, and other regular maintenance. And whereas the MDOT has submitted a contract that continues this relationship for the next fiscal year, contract number 2019-0783. Now therefore be it resolved, the city of Swartz Creek agrees to enter into a contract with the Michigan Department of Transportation, a copy of which is attached hereto for the purpose of maintaining the park and ride facility on Miller Road. Be it further resolved that the city of Swartz Creek designate the Director of Public Services as the maintenance superintendent, the finance director as the contract supervisor, and further directs the city manager to execute the agreement on behalf of the city.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, to a point made in public comment, it would be the treasurer at this point. The job title for finance director has been rolled into that position.
Okay.
That happened with the retirement of Ms. Agnew.
I did not hear a second.
Second.
Thank you. Now I heard that. Are you speaking to the motion? Let's call roll on the motion, please.
Farmer,
Yes.
Gilbert,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Krieger,
Yes.
Kingston,
Yes.
Root.
Yes.
Motion passes. Coming up, our last item of business, the noise ordinance. Have we all read it? Do you need to talk to us about it, or do we just start talking about what we saw in there?
This is something we've had some complaints about generally in terms of folks feeling our noise ordinance was too big. Both for those people that might have been accused of being too loud at some point, or for those people that feel they've got a situation in their neighborhood that's too loud, that there wasn't enough teeth to the ordinance or predictability to it to enforce it consistently and to a degree that's impactful. And so Chief Bay did a lot of homework, a lot of looking around, talking to the patrol officers that enforce it. And we believe we have a pretty good model, which is included as the draft ordinance that we could work with here in the community to be able to stay on top of some of these issues as they arise and do so in a way that there's not an officer having different findings than an officer that might have been on the same call the day before. Does that make sense? So you house party complaint, 2 a.m. one day, it's okay, the next day everything's the same, but that officer feels it's not okay. And I'm not blaming them, it's a subjective thing, how loud is loud. And so this ordinance makes it pretty black and white, and actually would require us to acquire some of the equipment to be able to read those and report those sounds and the intensity of them. So that's the intent. Then of course you have the draft there in front of you, and that's why I put it in front of council for discussion tonight, because I wasn't sure what the appetite was to change it at all, or to what degree we might consider the draft that is proposed.
All right, you mentioned teeth in the ordinance. What are the teeth in the ordinance? Are there going to be fines for excessive noise, or how are we going to deal with that?
Yeah, there'll be fines associated with the ordinance, for sure. I think the teeth he's referring to, what I take from that is this, the proposed ordinance provides more standards and guidelines. It removes a lot of subjectivity that the current ordinance has, much like the odor ordinance that you passed last council meeting. It makes it easier to enforce, and it's easier to enforce uniformly, the proposed ordinance.
As I was going through it, Mr. Zettel, I noticed on practically every page of the proposed new ordinance, it mentions township, I suggest you just do a search and replace that with city.
If it's something you guys want to do, we'll absolutely refine it to our specific model and needs.
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Hicks.
I don't know how much we're supposed to discuss, but one of the things they talk about is religious gatherings, and it's what happens if the church is outside, sort of thing, rather than in a building. And then another thing was the land use category, they don't talk about schools. Do you have any authority over schools and noise?
And I believe schools would be subject to the same,
Is it
but
business,
maybe not.
office, manufacturing, residential? I don't know.
Schools all have an underlying zoning district, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the use would be. What's obviously jumping to the front of my mind is the sporting events. Friday night football.
Right.
I can't imagine they would conform to the noise ordinance.
That's not, but that's, yeah. So, I don't know. It doesn't bother me, I just listen from my back porch, but it's.
Well, that's a good point. That's why we're doing this.
So, and another thing, when you talk about like electronics, the operation of any noise creating blower or power fan or internal combustion engine, I don't know if you want to mention if there's the electricity's out and people have generators running, if that's an exception somehow. I mean, that's common sense, but you never know.
I mean, that's a good question, because generators come out when the power goes out, and people generally understand it. It's temporary.
Right.
But I can promise we could also get calls because someone puts a generator right next to someone's. Like we do get ongoing generator complaints because a lot of the contemporary generators are on a gas system and they do an automatic startup
Well, the
for
school,
15 minutes a week or something.
again, the school's generator is right behind my house, and when they first started testing it, because they test it every week, they tested it on Saturday afternoon when everybody was having, people around our house. I called and they moved it to a Monday during the day, so it's not like they didn't help, but that was another one of those examples of strange things. Businesses have generators that they test.
Well, that's a really good point, and I think you could affect that by maybe requiring the same timeline.
Right.
For
But I didn't know,
people that run
again,
them.
it's schools, so I don't know what that would be.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yes. The cars going down Miller Road going boom, boom. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And also, I wanted to ask you, Chief, if motorcycles, if they don't have mufflers, are they supposed to have baffles in the pipe? Because I'm telling you, they're loud,
Oh, I know.
a lot of them.
I would think that a lot of the motorcycles out there violate noise ordinances, no doubt
Oh,
about
man,
it.
you know, you take like Saturday afternoon, you get a nice day in that,
Mhm.
and they're going through there, and I mean,
No, I agree.
yeah, that's. But as far as the football games and that, I can hear them at my house.
Yeah, I just,
That don't
and Swartz
bother,
Creek has a,
that don't bothers me as much as, it's something going down the road, going boom, 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 and it's rattling the stuff in the china cabinet. That's all.
Is that something we can address through?
Yeah, I think you're all making a point for this particular ordinance, just the examples you cited. Those are things you should think about. And, customize this ordinance to Swartz Creek if you should decide to move forward with this. But as you can see, those things you're talking about in the current ordinance, it's hard to enforce, it's very vague. And I don't, speaking of schools, schools aren't exempt from noise ordinances. So that's something you would have to consider as you draft this.
right.
Thank you.
And
That's why we're discussing it, Mr. Gilbert.
What?
That's why we're discussing renewing the ordinance.
Yeah. Well, I can hear people in the summertime if I got a window open and it's nice out at night. I can hear them down to my house cussing and swearing. I don't know why, but that noise it just seems to carry that way. That's all I have.
Anyone else? Mrs. Root?
Okay, I think it does list schools in the exceptions. I know this is just a draft example, but number 8 of the exceptions, it says the sound of a parade, outdoor band concert, athletic event, or school event, and it goes on. But then it says, as long as it's not disturbing people more than 50 feet away, and so I think we would need to extend that, because obviously the football games carry much further than 50 feet. And just make sure that that's listed in the exceptions also.
One of the other things, Mr. Zittle, that we might want to put in there as an exception is the sound of the train whistle. Because we have some really loud trains going through our town. And when they blow the whistle, you can't hear anything while they're going that, indoors or out. But we don't want them to go through without blowing the whistle, to make sure that people know they're coming. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes when they're coming through there, and I don't know why, but they just lay on that whistle. It just goes like through the whole town. Other times it's just toot toot, you know. I guess it depends on the engineer. They just like to make noise.
It probably depends on if they got their 10-year-old grandkid with them.
Well, I could be, yeah.
So council's aware that 60 decibels, I believe, is the benchmark of what people talking or ambient noise with conversation is supposed to be. And so you see that as kind of the median allowable noise level. So that in theory, if you're in your backyard talking and something's happening where you have to start being louder to overcome it, that's the threshold. So train, not too close to the train. If you gotta pause your TV, chances are you're getting something higher than 60 decibels. You know, if you can hear something and it bothers you because it's maybe what they're saying, but it doesn't actually require you to speak over it, then it's probably below it. So I just say that anecdotally so you have a sense of where those numbers came from.
So, sorry. So would the police be in charge of enforcing this? So you'd have to call 911 and then you'd have to catch the person doing this? How are you going to enforce something that's transient, so to speak?
Well, any misdemeanor is enforced by catching them doing the act. So if the noise is continuing on, and the officer gets there, they can take enforcement or determine whether enforcement needs to be taken.
But if it's stopped?
They can generally officers make contact with wherever they call and figure out what's going on and give a warning.
Okay. So it wouldn't be a first time you have to talk to them, you wouldn't automatically give them a fine? It would be see if you can fix it sort of thing?
Right, unless you're the neighbor and you're insisting on making a complaint, which at that time you'd become the complainant.
Okay.
Chief Bade, we do have a traffic enforcement officer. Will that officer have a sound meter in his car so he can check these things?
We haven't got that far yet where the sound meter will be assigned to, but the sound meter, if you proceed with this, we'll have a sound meter available.
Okay. Do we know how much those things cost? I mean,
They're not expensive.
20 to $60 seem to be cheap. I think actually some of the other departments said you can get an app on your phone. I don't know, it'd be a question for our prosecutor, what would be court admissible? But it wouldn't surprise me one bit if there's a standard Google or Apple app that is a reliable source of, decibel gauge or whatever you want to call it. So, but just pricing it out, doing a web search, it wouldn't be much at all to outfit probably every patrol car with one of these.
We do
Not
have
to
to,
speak for the budget though, I mean, we could combine as a city if we felt it was important to enforce here, and it would be.
You do have to standardize those. It's required under ANSI or whatever they were talking about in there. There's a special attachment so that if you do have to go to court, you can say, yep, this is standardized yearly and everybody's been trained, sort of thing.
Council want to see another draft or something more refined?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it's going to be picky.
I think that pretty much concludes our business this evening. We shall open the floor to our guests tonight. Anybody think of anything else you'd like to address the council about? We've seen you before.
Sit down.
Two comments. First of all, I'd like to thank the council for the approval of the fire budget, and also a comment that it feels good to be able to communicate and work well with the council, the city manager, and the township. I believe we have a good communications, good process going. Second thing, just a bit of information. I'm not sure how much of the council or the public's aware, but Swartz Creek Area Fire Department is one of only 2 departments in Genesee County that has had line of duty deaths within their organization. Every year, the Genesee County Fire Chiefs Association conduct a memorial at Fort Memorial Park in Colorado. This year it's September 7th at 10 a.m. Fire Chief Edward Pavlika passed away in the line of duty in 1971, and Chris Hilden in 1989, who was our chief engineer at the time. I had the honor of knowing Chris personally, as well as probably Bob Plum did as well. But just want to make the council aware and the public aware that that's something that is done every year. The families come out, the fire departments come out, and honor the memory of the firefighters that not died in the line of duty. And Swartz Creek, the city of Flint are the only ones that have, the city of Flint has 10 names on the wall, and Swartz Creek has 2. So just provide that information. If anyone's interested, I'd like to see you there. And it's really good. It's something that I think the families appreciate, and I know the Hilton family's been there every year since the memorial's been dedicated, and that's just over 20 years. So thank you for your time.
Anyone else? And then we will close the public comments and move on to remarks by council members. And I believe you have the remark.
Yes, I just have a question about the permitting for the ice cream trucks that drive through the neighborhoods, and what qualifications, or like what benchmarks do they have to meet to get permitted?
They get the standard solicitation permit, full background check for everybody.
So no,
We
like,
haven't approved any this year, so
oh, they come through.
So they're coming through without.
So
some of
there's
them
no,
are really shady.
yeah,
So we don't know about them because if no one's permitted and they come into town at, Saturday at 2 p.m., it's up to people to request to see it, or to notify the police, or I think we communicate all the solicitation permits direct to Metro. So in theory, patrol officers would know, on a shift change, if anybody's supposed to be in town.
well, 2 comments to that. Would it be possible to have something, just like a business has to adhere to, like, an appearance, like we just went through with the Big B Coffee, and like, are we gonna waive the colors that they can use? Could there not be some sort of, like, requirement that it look a little bit nicer driving through the neighborhoods? And then also, there is an ice cream van coming through, and they post, like, in the Swartz Creek Facebook something, I'm in Swartz Creek, who wants me to stop by? And then people comment, so we probably could track them down.
Last comment's interesting. If you have an invitation, you're no longer a solicitor. Schwann's Delivery is a good example. If you're on their list, they come and deliver a UPS, another example, I guess.
Okay.
And so that might be a clever way for someone to say, look,
But then when they leave that said location and they
It
drive
wouldn't-
down
it's
the other
supposed to be-
streets, and
it's supposed to be door to door. So if they're doing the standard ice cream peddling up and down the street with the music going, then they have to obviously have a solicitation permit for that. And we have not issued any, so it'd be an immediate no-brainer. If the police are notified, just stop them and kick them out of town.
these improvements to the city and, you know, making it look nice, and then we allow somebody to come through just because they have a clear, good background check, but their van isn't looking great.
Different color panels on the side.
Yeah. My kids are afraid of it. Like, my 8 and 10-year-olds who love ice cream don't want to go to it, so I'm just saying.
Right now, we don't really have standards for what the vending vehicle, I mean, it has to be operable, licensed, insured, of course.
But could we?
And we probably could, I don't know what that would look like. I mean, to be fair to the general public, to say you gotta have a good-looking vehicle.
Well, just anybody doing
Tough.
business in Swartz Creek, we, you know, where they don't have their windows boarded up,
Right.
you know, and stuff like that, so.
It's just creepy looking.
It's really creepy.
Yeah. If you guys can help me, I'm not being a smart aleck, but if you can put into, like, you know, bullet point terms, what it means to not be creepy looking, then it's probably a requirement we can have, but I'm not gonna be
We just say, please
comfortable
don't
at
be
the counter,
creepy.
just like, oh no, not you.
I don't know,
I
I
know
just
I'm
feel
not
like,
a term, but shouldn't it have, I mean, when I was a kid, it said have a bar, ice cream, and it gave a phone number and address. This thing has no phone number, no name, no address. You know, there's no man in there with a white paper hat and a white shirt like it used to be.
Doesn't require something.
well, if they're unlicensed and they're just doing this.
That's the point.
I suspect what this group is probably doing is not gonna be permissible in any event, because if I were to guess, they're probably doing resale of items they're not allowed to do resale of and have no other permits from any other agency of government anywhere, and probably aren't paying the sales, or, you know, I mean, I'm above board on anything, if I were to guess, because I think I've seen this one around. But maybe that's not even fair, I mean, I'm comfortable describing it as creepy myself as a person, but I have to make it fair, transparent, predictable.
Yeah,
We're gonna
so just
require
like
that.
we have
So-
guidelines for businesses in the downtown area, perhaps we could have guidelines for anybody else doing business in the city. I don't know what that would involve to create those guidelines, but it might, I think it might be.
But the issue with this case is probably they're not allowed to be there, like, we're not approving them, so it's
Right,
probably.
but if they did come and go, oh, we didn't know we needed a permit,
Yeah.
here's our permit, we have a good background,
Then you still gotta drive
then
around.
they still
with it.
have a really shady looking vehicle.
Looking shady. Agreed. Let me look into that.
Right, Chief Bade, if you would have your officers have an APB out for any ice cream trucks.
Not American.
No clowns.
And
I can dispose of the other.
as she's describing this, I'm wondering, Chief, if your officer flags down a truck and buys an ice cream, is that kind of like a drug deal in Flint where we got them? Because
Might be entrapment, I don't know.
Mr. Farmer.
I just want to compliment Chief. I'm on the fire board, and he always, at all the meetings, he's organized, and his budget and his monies are always right down the line, so it's pretty easy to check it out, and he keeps us up to date, so my compliments.
Mr. Gilbert.
Yes, my compliments to you also. I think I said earlier, all I had to say.
Thanks.
Hardman Park, they had room for 82 tents, filled all 82 spots. My neighbor behind me, Bob Quickingham, that was on the street committee with us, there was a guy there selling fish baits. He bought me a fish plug. It was green and white with a big block S on it. Doesn't get any better than that. Probably catch a lot of fish. That's it.
Those plugs are actually intended to catch fishermen.
See that movie?
And I know school's starting this week, and I think Dancing with the Stars is starting up really soon, and I was thinking you're talking about making it fun to go to school if we have Dancing with the Crossing Guards.
I'm willing to try that out too.
coming up, celebrating the 60th anniversary of Swartz Creek becoming a city. And our Historical Society, Wednesday, the 11th of September, 9/11, kind of an important date in America. 7 p.m. here in the council chambers. They're going to have a slide presentation on our city's history. Everybody's invited and encouraged to attend. And that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
See.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Yes.